Is registering, as in the test works.
Because I don't need to do anything from this computer. Let's see if it works. Can you hear me now? Let's see if it works. We'll just test it. 1, 2, 3. Bismillah. 1, 2, 3. Testing. Don't worry. We'll give you more time. Oh, now it's cool. Abdul Aziz said it works. Thank you, Abdul Aziz. Okay. There might have been some issues. So I don't know if you're saying you're cool, Abdul Aziz, or if you're saying the mic is cool and working, but I think it's working. So if it doesn't work, do let me know, inshallah ta'ala. So I was asked a question about following the school of law. Someone sent a particular question that they say that in the Maliki madhab, if a woman is menstruating, she can pray the Quran, whereas in a Hanafi school of law, they deem it impermissible. My response is always the straightforward response is that one should try to follow a school of law that they are affiliated with to the extent that they are able to do so, and not leave that school of law unless they have a dharura, a need, or a haja. It's something that they need to do. You're in a difficult situation, and usually that's something like to follow the school of law in that particular situation becomes very difficult or impractical for you. So try and maintain your following of a school of law. And all the schools of law, of course, are legitimate, they're all valid, but they have their own logic, they have their own way of working. And if you've been following some of our content, you'll find that that's the case. But we don't need to become so militant on these things as well. At the same time, there's always a golden mean that needs to be struck. There was another tricky question that came up. Mortgage rates have been going through the roof. I'm with someone called Al Rayyan. It's gone up by £200 a month. Can I switch to conventional bank for short, medium term as cheap and more affordable for me? My family status has changed. My wife doesn't work as much, and newborn children expenses, as you know, has increased. Um, I mean, everybody knows my position on this. I've written a very detailed academic paper um, where I explore some of these questions on Darul Islam, Darul Harb. Sheikh Mufti Amin did a recent video where he talked about this question as well. So if it comes to a situation where it's impractical, you can take the position in the school, and that can work for you. So there is leeway in that. I would always go to your local mufti, your local imam, and consult them as the first point of contact. When it comes to mu'amalat, when it comes to mortgages, it's always best to consult a scholar who's reliable, who's knowledgeable in these matters. But the Hanafi school has a very unique position, as most of you are aware, when it comes to the question of interest and so forth. So that is a valid position. Many ulama still argue that it's still in person permissible, but there's a valid discussion to be had in these areas. But I have written a very detailed paper, and you'll find a lot of this stuff on the internet as well. So yeah, there is leeway in that. Let's see if there's any more questions. Okay, so you can ask questions obviously as we're proceeding through this video, this series. A few people have asked me questions about studying. I always seem to be getting a lot of questions about studying and who to study with. I always encourage people to study, if you want to study Islamic sciences and learn about your religion, but not give up your full-time job, or if you're at university, you're studying, you should first and foremost be studying Islamic sciences. So whether you're an alim or you want to become an alim, every Muslim should be learning obviously the farz ain. So you need to know like obligations in terms of prayer, fasting, these sort of things. But I think many of you are more than capable of also studying further, whether you do that part time. Now remember, you don't have to do something in 7 years. You could do something over 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. I run an Arabic course. I'm not teaching them Arabic to finish very, very quickly. I'm teaching them Arabic so that they'll become masters in the language. They'll know it better than, hopefully, they'll know it better than me. And I would be very happy for them to do that. So, um, in the evening, find some time, weekend, find some time, find a good teacher, enroll onto a course, and learn the basics first. A lot of us engage in debates or like to read about debates, but we don't really know the basics. So it's always good to learn subjects like Arabic, grammar, syntax. Good to learn about logic. There's some really good books now on logic, some good teachers learning on logic, learning the basics of your creed, learning the basics of theology, learning the basics of usul, learning what we call the auxiliary sciences, the basic sciences, because Islamic tradition, to understand Quran, to understand the Sunnah, to understand the Hadith, to understand books of fiqh, like these very, very beautiful but complicated texts, requires you to have a good grounding in Arabic language, good grounding in thinking skills, good grounding in Hadith, good grounding in Quran, good grounding in language. Language is very, very important in the in our Islamic tradition. So start learning, and don't wait. You don't have to join a formal course. Many institutions are running part-time courses, or if you don't have time for that, find someone, get a group of friends together, and start studying with someone. Pay the alim, pay the teacher. If you get 10 brothers together in a room somewhere, pay the teacher. All of you pay him, look after him, and study with him, and ask around who's the best for teaching such and such a subject, because you'll find that some teachers are really good at hadith, for example, others are much stronger at fiqh, some are strong in aqidah, some are very strong in tafsir. You'll find different sciences. Some teachers are very good at teaching Arabic, you know. And I've always said that if you find a really good teacher in a subject, not only will you learn a lot, but it will make you passionate about that subject. So you can always tell a teacher is very good by the passion that he has when he teaches that subject. He's really passionate. He really wants you to do really well. Um, and he comes there in a lesson with a zeal. He comes prepared. He knows what he's talking about, and you walk away feeling like you want to learn more. So get to a stage where you're thirsty for knowledge. Develop what's called an appetite for learning. Don't just sit there thinking that you'll absorb knowledge watching TV. You won't learn stuff by just watching YouTube. You learn stuff by actually getting into books and grappling with those questions. Even if you're learning Arabic, trying to understand how Arabic works, how the language works, thinking about the language, that will make you much more adept at learning that language and also learning Islamic sciences. So in our day and age, I think we need a bit of both. I would argue that we need people to be very, very much grounded in Islamic sciences, but we also need them to be very strong when it comes into talking about modern sciences, whether it's the secular sciences. So we need scientists who are ulama, we need doctors who are ulama, we need dentists who are ulama, we need engineers who are ulama, because only then will these sciences benefit because they'll have a religious tone to it, if you like. So I hope that's been useful to someone who asked that particular question. Anybody else have any questions you can ask, inshallah, and I'm happy to try and help out where I can. What is the theological reason being behind the action of making the haram halal? I don't quite understand your question. If you can just reframe the question, what is it? I think if I understand what you're saying, is that why is it a form of kufr to make something that's haram halal? Um, because if it's very clear in the Quran, and if you as a believer believe the Quran is the final word on certain matters that are very clear, what we call qad'i, then one is not able to change those things. To be honest, the things that are halal or haram rather are very few. There are very few boundaries that are completely clear. A lot of times it's yeah. Why is it a form of kufr? Because it's showing in a way that you know better than God. God has the right to make something haram. Only He can do that. This is why scholars are very, very careful about making things haram unless they have an absolute clear text, sorry, something that's very clear, something that's qat'i, absolutely clear without any doubt about making things haram. This is a modern problem where people just make things haram all the time without really going into the usul. To make something haram in the Hanafi mazhab, they are very careful. They'll say makruh or they'll say makruh tahrimi. Some things obviously are completely haram, like riba is haram, right? It's clear. Riba is haram. You can't make it halal. Eating, eating pigs, for example, is haram. There's no way you can make it halal. These things are qat'i. These things are absolutely clear in the Quran. Other things, they are dependent on obviously how scholars interpret these things. So kufr is not only disbelief; it's also a form of ingratitude. It has many meanings, and one of them is to behave in a way that you think you know better than Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. Okay. A lot of people are obsessed with like kufr and halal and haram. These things are important. We need to know our boundaries, but we also need to know how to live in the world. The Prophet ﷺ also taught us, at least Sahaba, how to live in the world as well. It was about everything. It wasn't just making things haram all the time or halal all the time. It wasn't just about boundary making. It was also how to live in the world. How do you live if you live in France? How do you live in France? If you live in India, how do you live in India? How do you deal with some of the challenges that we're facing? But how do you make also Islam something that's livable? How do you make your faith livable um, living in the world today? Okay. So that's important. About someone's asked about the ta'wil and correct creator position regarding. I'll talk about that maybe in a detailed lesson, Abdul Aziz. Um, about I think you're talking about kufr, aren't you? Oh, what about this? Have I just left the studio? Am I still there? This one. Still left the studio. I'm here. So Abdul Aziz has asked, can you give the ta'wil and correct creedal position regarding? I think you're talking about kufr. So that's something I can do, but I don't really want to do it in today's video. But maybe in a longer conversation we can get into it. There are books written on this. Um, it's not for the average person like me to go around making kufr on people. I've seen this a lot. in our theology, it's about the people people invested with authority to do it. So, if you lived in a Darul Islam, no one on the street could say to someone you're a kafir. You can't do that. It would be up to the state to do that. And there are ways of doing that as well. Okay. No, you don't have to apologize, Abdulaziz. You don't have to apologize for Akida related question. Akida is important, but we don't need to get too invested in it. The main thing is that um, we don't necessarily have to do kufr on everyone. What I'm saying is that we can find charitable ways of understanding things. Yeah. Um, Hamid asked the question: if you are a musafir, I think you mean musafir, and have to travel back home knowing you are going to travel again. If you're a musafir and have to travel back home knowing you are going to travel again to the same place more than 20 on the same day, would you say musafir? No, so it's very simple. Hamid, once you leave your home, usually they talk about at what point have you left your home. Usually it's like a place you would consider that you're out on your journey. So they would say places like the graveyards, because the graveyards in those days used to be in the outer parts of the city. So when you leave the city and you go, then you're musafir, right? Then you're traveling. Some ulama give 48 miles, they give different measurements, but let's just leave that one to side. Once you come back, you become a muqim again. So if there's a prayer in that time, then you pray the prayer as a muqim. Even if you're going out again, once you leave again, you'll become a musafir again. So so you wouldn't be a musafir at home, because the whole thing about musafir and being a muqim is that a muqim is someone who's at home, right? You've come back, and so now you're praying the prayer. If it was prayer time, so you came home and it was Asr time, then you'd pray 4 rakat Asr at home, because it's your muqim. You're no longer traveling, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that when you're traveling, faqsuru min as-salah. So Allah's given you that dispensation when you're traveling. I hope that's been useful. The phrase minor shirk is used for certain things, just a phrase used to show the gravity of action, or does it actually entail? Yeah, good question. So shirk is when they talk about minor shirk, it's a form of like warning, um, to show that you're kind of going in a direction which you shouldn't be going. Don't go down that way. And shirk usually understood as anything that may lead to one. This is minor shirk. Minor shirk is something that may lead one to a position where there's infractions taking place in terms of divinity. So you're doing something which it might lead to infraction upon divinity, i.e., Allah's rights. So, you know, you might do something, and it can be physical and it can also be spiritual. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran at the end of Surah Kahf, He talks about doing things for Riyah, showing off for people. Now that's not a that's both an inner state and an external state as well. Inner state is that your heart is not in the right place, you're doing it to show off. But it can also be that you're physically doing it to show people that you're a pious person. So those things are not accepted by Allah, because you're supposed to do things khalis lillah. So the opposite of shirk is obviously ikhlas, which is khalasa, to do something with no, it's like a glass that's empty, completely empty, like this one, completely empty, and you're doing it only for the sake of God. There's no personal motives in there. So ulama have this to say that this is something that could lead to shirk or associating partners with God, because God is free from any need. God doesn't need any partners. Jazakallah, Hamid. I like the way you phrase it. Just want to double check, as brother asked. I thought you were going to say asking for a friend. I get a lot of that now. Mawlana, can I ask you a question? I'm asking for a friend. So you're welcome. Safe travels wherever you're going to. Um, so Allah, out of His mercy, has given us the gift of, if you like, of reducing the units of prayer that we need to pray when we're traveling. Faqsuru min as-salah. So Allah has given you is a dispensation from God. That's also an ibadah, by the way, that when Allah gives you something as a form of dispensation, you take it, and that's a gift from your Creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay. How do we navigate differences of opinion? The difference of source of doubt for many people. Yes. So this requires one to know what are areas of our deen that are non-negotiable. So some things are non-negotiable. For example, Aqidah questions. Aqidah questions to believe in Allah. No one can debate these things. Like in terms of saying, oh well, there's a possibility we might have two gods or three gods. No, na'udhu billahi min zalik. These are things that are clear cut. When it comes to prayer, performing the prayer, performing the salah, the namaz is a farz. It's an obligation. It's known and that's clear. Now, where the difference lie is, well, what is the exact way of praying? Okay, is praying Fatiha? Uh, do we have to pray Fatiha aloud? Do we pray when the Imam? When we praying behind the Imam? All of these things are legitimate differences of opinion, and every school of thought, the four main ones, law schools, will have differences. So you have three areas. You have Aqidah, which is usually concrete. There's not much debate in these areas, right? That's why it's to do with belief. That's why in Aqidah, if someone says, um, I believe in angels, that's fine. That's all you need to believe. If someone says, well, are angels like this, and do they have this many wings, and is this like this, all the details that Quran hasn't really told us about, then it doesn't matter. Those are minor details. And you can just basically say, Allahu Alam. You can say Allah knows best, and that's fine because Aqidah is just to do with belief. Okay? Now, fiqh is different. Fiqh by nature is practical. It's to do with the lived world. So by nature, you have to come to some sort of answer. Someone asked me a question to do with fiqh, to do with practice, because fiqh is to do with practice, but it's obviously very intellectual. It requires you to think very hard. You have to give your brother an answer. You can't say to your brother or a sister that, oh, Allahu Alam, I can't really give an answer, right? You have to then do ijtihad. So naturally, you're going to come to different conclusions. One person might read a certain text, a verse in the Quran, a hadith, or something else from a Judaist, and he'll come to a different conclusion. That's the reason why you have differences of opinion, and they're all valid. Some are stronger than others. In each school of law, they'll have ways of tarjih. Some will become stronger than others based on the arguments that the ulama have. So when it comes to fiqh, we should allow and we should be quite comfortable with differences of opinion. People shouldn't be killing each other over it, right? They shouldn't be like, attacking each other over it. We should allow these differences of opinion. And the best way to look at this is look at the four Imams themselves. In their own time, they entertain differences of opinion. Even within the schools, let me tell you, within Hanafi school, Imam Abu Hanifa, his students, Imam Abu Yusuf, Imam Zufar, Imam Muhammad, they all differed with him. In fact, you have books on this where they differed on them. And over time, they said, well, this is probably the strongest one. So we have to be comfortable as Muslims with differences of opinion. It's a very modern condition, it's modernity when it comes to fiqh where people say, oh, there's only one right answer. There can only be one right answer. We wouldn't have the Musawwiba then. Musawwiba is basically this idea, this framing in our tradition that this framing within our tradition that um, there can be everybody's trying different ways to get to the answer, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the one answer, but we're just required to work out to the best of our human faculties the right answer. And this happened in time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told a group of Sahaba that they should reach a certain point and pray Asr. On their way, it was Asr time, and they were going to miss Asr. So some prayed and some didn't. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself said they are both correct. So you can have multiple answers. It's modernity to think, oh, there can only be one answer, everybody's wrong. It's a form of arrogance. It's a form of lack of reading of the tradition, lack of reading of the madhab. Yes, you can debate which one's stronger, but one should not say to someone they're wrong. One should not ostracize someone for having a valid difference of opinion. And if they have a difference of opinion, they should write it down, just like the ulama before, they wrote all their works down and let it be debated. Okay, this is a healthy attitude to have, and this is the Islamic tradition. Unless they say something that's clearly out of the bounds of Islam, then there's something different. So I just want to share that with you as well. Um, and this has really come, in my view, due to colonialism. I'll give you references where, when the British, for example, just to give an example, when they came to India, they came across this book, Hidayah. Now, when you read this book, it's a masterpiece. They found it very difficult that when the ulama were reading these books, and people were coming to them with questions, they were flexible in the answers that they gave. They were very flexible. They worked it out in a way that helped people. They actually went out of their way to help people. The British were like, this is nonsense. We can't do this. How are we going to run a government? But the Muslims were doing this for centuries. They were fine doing this. They were like, how do we do this? The British were like, okay, what we need to do is we need to have a structure where we can just give people right or wrong answers, right? So they replaced the ulama who were judges, and they basically replaced them with they literally translated this book, right? Parts of it, and they use their own systems to force upon people like, oh, we need like black and white answers on certain things. Whereas the Sharia was inherently flexible. It worked in a way that actually helped people, because the whole point is that we believe that Muslims, when they come to you, they are trying to obey God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the best way possible, but it's not always going to be perfect. It's not going to be optimum. So the ulama are trying to find solutions for them that will actually practically work for them and will maintain their faith, maintain their religion in a real world situation. So this is happening in the Muslim world. And what happened was we've been colonized, so we kind of think like that as well. But when you read very, very carefully, you'll find that the ulama are very open. They debate these things. They really sophisticated ways of argumentation. I mean, if you watch some of my videos on the mind of a jurist, you'll see some of this. And I hope to produce more videos to show classical examples of these things as well. Fiqh al-Akbar can be attributed to Abu Hanifa. There's some conversations on that. This is again a detailed question. I don't know if anything's been written on this. Someone was looking into it. There were some YouTube videos shared, but I'm not too clear on that particular question, so I don't want to dabble into it. And why does it matter? And that'll be another question as well. Is there a reason why you want to know? So let me know, inshallah. Imam Abu Hanifa was a jurist and a great legal mind, and obviously he had a great theological mind as well. He was a theologian. He was a mutakallim. He understood belief very, very well. He's deeply grounded. He was a genius. When you read his works, absolutely genius, as many ulama of the past were. And we can still produce them today if we allow people to think, if you allow people to research, if you allow people to do things. Because we have inferiority complex, somebody starts doing something, we just attack them, we just point guns at them. What we should do is allow people to explore things. Yeah, I haven't read. I was going to say Dr. Rahman Harvey's article. I haven't read it yet, just like you. So when you read it, you can share your insights. Maybe I'll invite you on to this program, and you can share what you've read. Maybe share the article with me, um, and then we can read it. Okay, beautiful. I'm just going to check if there's some more questions coming through or not. Any more questions do we have? We'll meet next Friday anyway, inshallah ta'ala. But just want to say, very good question. How does one reconcile between the discouragement of choosing between mazahib for the easier opinion and the concept that Prophet ﷺ was given two options, he chose the easy one? Yeah, so, good question. So, I think when people discourage this idea of choosing between mazahib, um, it's usually done with the idea, it's usually understood with the idea that people are doing it because they're following their desires. But if a person is genuinely doing it because he's not following his desires, but it just works for him, it's practical, then I don't think it's an issue. Like it's very, very easy, and you'll find many examples of this in history where ulama, if they try to follow their particular school of law, it would become impractical. So there's a very good PhD, I think, written on how in India, when the British were there was an issue in terms of women seeking divorce. And sometimes, if they were in a very disruptive relationship, they couldn't get out because the husband wouldn't give them a divorce. And the judge, they had to go to a Muslim judge. They had to go to a judge, but the Muslims were no longer in authority. They weren't there anymore, and so they would go to non-Muslims. British installed judges, and they would say, "Well, just become a non-Muslim, just leave Islam, and your marriage is broken." So then the ulama had to think outside of the box to say, well, if you follow a particular school of law, it's not going to work. So then looked at the Maliki madhab. So you'll find this where if it becomes impractical, you can follow a school of law. What I always say to people is like normatively try and follow a school of law. That gives you consistency, that gives you it's practical, it's normative. But if it becomes very, very impractical for whatever reason, then at that point, then you might want to depart and just get some mashwara, speak to an alim, a scholar who, a mufti who knows what he's talking about, get a view from them. And then it's clear you're not doing it because you're following your desires. You're not picking and choosing all the time. You're just doing it because at that particular moment in time or that particular circumstance not working for you. Okay, so that's the flexibility that's in our religion. Again, not being too sort of stringent on it, but not to being too relaxed about it as well. So yeah, on that one, I think there's a PhD on it. There's also been a new publication in Arabic on it. So I don't know if you know Arabic, but you can read Arabic. Urdu reading, just read lots of Urdu, I guess, and having a good teacher. Unfortunately, my father taught me Urdu at a young age, and it was one of the best things that he ever taught me because Urdu opened up another world for me. So even now, I encourage people to to study Urdu. Make dua. I hope my daughters will study it too. I want my daughters to know the Urdu language because it gives you a connection with at least a part of your history. So there's lots of benefits in Urdu. It's not a sacred language, but it's very, very useful. Read Urdu, watch Urdu content, get good literature. Maybe if you reach out to me, I'll put you in touch with some people who might be able to help. But it's very sad that in the West, especially Muslims who come from South Asia, don't really keep a connection with this language. But more so than Urdu, Persian is really important. So learn Persian. If you know Arabic and Urdu, then Persian's not too much of a leap. All right. I'm just going to check if you have any more questions. Uh, I also want to say that we should make dua for our brothers and sisters in Morocco and also in Libya, that part of the world. Very difficult circumstances for people there. Make dua, Allah Ta'ala makes it easy for them. But also everywhere else in the world, wherever people are grieving, suffering, lost of loved ones, try and support them, make dua for them, supplicate for them. We're an ummah that looks after one another, we support one another, we take care of one another. Yes, we can have all these academic debates and fights and struggles on YouTube and social media and maybe in mosque prayer halls. But at the end of the day, we're still brothers, we're still sisters, we're still a community, we're still an ummah. And there's a sacred aspect where we should show respect and basic dignity towards other people. I think that's very, very important. Especially we live in an age which is ravaged by egotistical behavior. In an age where everybody thinks they know better than everybody else, there isn't that humility that sometimes we need to learn from one another. So we ask Allah to grant us that as well. And so do support these causes. It's important that we pray for our Muslim brothers wherever they may be. Inshallah ta'ala. Let me just check if I've got any more questions. If we haven't, we will conclude. Thank you so much to everyone with their questions and your thoughts and reflections. Hopefully, we can continue. We try to keep it to half an hour every week. So hopefully next Friday I won't be traveling. So we can meet next Friday at the same time, 5 p.m. Do let friends know. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Please do send comments, feedback, and we'd love to hear from you. Until next week, have a lovely week. Allah protect you, preserve you all, keep you all blessed. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.